My name's Tom Rathie. I'm an account executive here at LES. I have the privilege of working with some of our larger usage customers in our service territory, helping them with anything related to their interaction with and reliance upon LES. So we want to thank you for joining us for this LES Smart Energy Forum, when the power goes out, what LES does, and what you can do. It's been a while since we hosted one of these forums, but since it's Nebraska Severe Weatherness, boy, that's a hard one to say. Nebraska Severe Weather Awareness Week, that's underway. We had the tornado drill the other day, and severe weather season's quickly approaching. We felt this was a timely and important topic to revisit. So this is also a milestone year for LES as we celebrate our 60th anniversary of serving Lincoln and its surrounding area. So we're grateful to have customers like you with us as we continue building a reliable, resilient energy future. Today we hope to give you some behind the scenes look at how LES responds to outages and share some key considerations and practices your business may want to have in place before severe weather season hits us or before that severe weather impacts your operations. Before we kick this off and begin, I'd like to introduce Amy Savoda. She's a communications specialist here at LES, and Amy's going to be monitoring the chat throughout today's session. We encourage you to submit questions at any time. Your engagement helps us make these forums as useful and as relevant as possible. So let's get started. Let's talk outages. Most of the time, when your lights go out, they come back on rather quickly, usually in a matter of hours, often less, sometimes in just a few seconds. And we take that for granted, don't we? However, we have had 4 major storms in the past 2 years. These storms have caused outages extending well beyond what we're kind of have gotten used to. Unfortunately, up to several days for some of our customers. So over time, we've come to appreciate the quick restoration LES consistently delivers. However, it's kind of made it a challenge for us, and it feels more noticeable and challenging when these longer outages occur and we have to work through and live through those. So here's some facts. LES never guarantees uninterrupted electrical service. There's just too many things that are out of our control. Wind, lightning, ice, critters, carpool accidents, dig-ins, excavation damage, just to name a few. Those are things we just can't control, so we cannot guarantee your power is always going to be on. So today we're really going to talk about 2 things. What LES does to restore power when it goes out, and then within that, some of what makes the restoration times drastically different, sometimes a few seconds, and then sometimes an outage that could literally take days for the customer. The other thing we'll talk about is what you can do to prepare for outages in your business. What's your organization could do to prepare to be without power for a short or a long-term duration outage, because as you're going to hear, they can be, again, from a few seconds to a few days. We want to leave some time at the end to address questions, so that's really our agenda for today. So why is it taking so long? During restoration, we receive a lot of questions. We have people calling into our call center. We see social media. We just hear it we have people come up to our crews on the street. Here's the things we're hearing. The storm's passed. Why are my lights still off? The lights are on across the street. Why am I still out? I saw an LES truck drive by, and I know they're nearby in the neighborhood, but it's still been hours. How long can it really take? Don't they understand how critical this is for me? My pets, my plants, my health needs? Why can't they just tell me when the power is going to be restored? So these are some of the things we hear, some of the things we have to deal with. So to maybe try to shed some light on what goes into that restoration, I'd like to introduce you to Joe Cave. Joe is a manager of our systems operations. Systems operations is the command center, essentially, of our local grid. Keeps the system running, and when something is out, they're the ones responding. They're identifying where those problems are, they determine the scope of the outage, they dispatch the troubleshooters to try to investigate and figure out what's going on, and then they direct the repair crews to go fix that damage that's been found. They develop a plan to do all this in a coordinated fashion, and then most importantly, to do it safely. So with that, here's Joe to talk about restoring power on a blue sky day versus during an extreme weather event.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. As Tom said, my name is Joe Cave. I'm the manager of system operation here at LES. And also, as he said, our group is responsible for the 24/7 monitoring and control and support of the system that we have here in town. So I'm going to go through what it looks like for us during a normal, what we call, quote unquote, a blue sky day when we have an outage. And then I'll touch base on the different situations that we see when we deal with an extreme weather event. All right. Hold on just a second. There we go. Okay. Okay, so if you could follow along on the top bar here, you'll see we'll go from the reporting aspect of it all the way down to the restoration. So when we get customer outages, we don't know until we have some kind of indication that we have an outage. So one of the first ways that we get that information is through our SCADA system. So this is just a screenshot of what our SCADA system looks like. And to boil that down, it's really just simply computers out on our system that are monitoring our equipment, and they bring back information like alarms on our equipment. When a breaker opens, we get that notification through our SCADA system. That shows up on a display for our operators, and they're able to respond accordingly. Another way that we receive reports is through our power line, so our phone number that customers call when they experience an outage. So they'll call, they'll report the situation that they're seeing, and that system will come into our outage management system, and our operators can see that information and respond. We also have the les.com outage entry form. So it's very similar to the same way that it works with the phone calls. They'll enter in their address, their name, and then the source of their problem, whether it's power out or blinking lights, or if they've noticed a wire down in their yard. And then the last way we get it is through a direct line with the 911 dispatch center. So when they see things or they get reports from folks in the public of some kind of emergency, and they know that it deals with the electrical system, they'll reach out to our system operators via this direct line. So one example is typically there are a lot of folks immediately on the scene. 911 dispatches their folks to that scene, and then they also call us at the same time. So I'm going to work through, after we get some reports of an outage, bear with me here, we lost a little bit of our animation. Okay. All right. So I'll set the stage here. So really, to understand what's going on here, this is just a map of what our system looks like as our operators see it. So you'll see on the top right-hand side, we have source number 1 that's feeding this neighborhood. So that's coming off of an overhead line, and then the blue line you see on there is an underground feed that goes through the neighborhood. You'll notice below that there's source number 2. So there's 2 sources to this neighborhood. And on the left-hand side, you'll see an open point. So our system is segmented throughout different areas with open points. So we've got 2 sources into this neighborhood, but not both of those sources are connected to all the lines. You'll also see these black triangles. Those are transformers. So each one of the transformers, in order for them to be fed by our system, it has to go through a transformer to step it down to the appropriate voltage. And then you'll also see in the bottom right-hand corner our customer feed. So that is the low voltage wires that go to the meter at the house or the business. So as we receive reports from customers, those show up as dots on our map. So it's essentially showing us that those customers have reported an issue or an outage. In this scenario, we've got 2 reported outages, and they're all on the same transformer. So the next step for the operator is to assess that situation, to evaluate any alarms that may have come in. They may call the customer back to get some context. In certain scenarios, when there's just a single outage that's submitted, they'll call back that customer to make sure that it's not something like their main breaker in their home, to make sure that there is actually an outage on the LES side of it and not the customer side. So once we've determined that there is an outage, we'll send a crew out. So we'll call in a crew during normal business days. That's typically pretty quick. They're out in the field and they're already working on some kind of project. So they'll head over to the location of the outage, and you're looking at maybe 10 to 15 minutes to get there. After hours is a different story. We don't have crews on 24/7. But we do have all of them on call to where we will submit an outage or a request for them to come in to take a look at what's going on the system. All right, let's see. I apologize, a little bit of an issue with the animation here. Okay, so as we get more calls from customers, we're starting to see a little bit of a different story. So we've got some new dots showing up on the map, showing that we've got customers out, and not just the small area that we had imagined before, but also other areas. So at some point, our outage management system will take that information, it'll make an assumption or make a guess to state that we think that the problem here is something upstream, so the source of the power getting into that neighborhood. So in this instance, we've got multiple transformers that have customers with outages. So it's assuming that we have a blown fuse at source number 1. So it'll populate the entire map with that assumption and show all of those customers out of service. And it'll populate all of the details for that incident with the number of customers that are connected to that source. The goal is to get out on site and to figure out what the source of the problem is. So the system has anticipated what the problem is, but we don't know exactly why that fuse has blown. So we'll get a troubleshooter out on site, and they'll go around and they'll look at what we call fault indicators that give us an idea of where the fault occurred. So in this instance, the red fault indicator says that the fault was past that point on our system. And the green fault indicator on the next transformer says that it did not see that fault, or the fault is before that point in the system. So based on the troubleshooters, what they're seeing out in the field, they determined that the cable in between those 2 transformers has failed, whether it's a dig-in or aging cable that just happened to get moisture into it to cause it to fail. Looks like I'm seeing the issues on each one of these slides here, so bear with me for a second. So the next step in the process is to switch around the failed equipment. So the troubleshooter will first go over to the transformer on the left, and they'll open a point on the system so that is no longer connected to the point of the failed equipment. Next, they'll go to the adjacent transformer and open up the system there. And then finally, they'll go to the transformer off to the left where you see the close sign there, and they'll close that normally open point to restore all of the customers on the left-hand side. So you can see source 2 feeds through there, goes through that now closed switch on the system, and restored power to all of the customers on that side of the failed equipment. And then they'll go over to the blown fuse and they'll replace that fuse. So now that feeds everybody that was fed from source 1 on the other side of the failed equipment. So now everybody in the system has been restored, power has been restored, and we've isolated the damaged cable. So now we get onto the repair part, and we'll bring a crew in to repair the damaged equipment. And once that's done, we're going back to the switching step. So we want to get the system back to its original state. So you'll see here we still have 2 open points that were not normally open points, and we have the closed switch that was not normally closed. So the troubleshooter will go back out and they will close those 2 points at the transformers that were adjacent to the failed equipment. And then they'll go over and they'll reopen that normal open point. So now the entire system is back to the state that it was before we had the outage. So all of this takes place in a fairly short amount of time with respect to the customers being out of service. So the troubleshooter gets out there, they find the source, and they isolate the equipment and get the customers restored. Now, the construction aspect of it, the replacing the cable or splicing the failed cable, that'll take longer, but without the customers out of service, it's less of an issue. So there are a lot of different scenarios where that changes drastically. So we'll go through one here real quick, where we'll assume that this transformer failed. So you can see all of the customer feeds that are coming off of that transformer, they're going to lose power. And they'll be without power until we can replace that transformer. So it's no longer a scenario of being able to isolate that and restore it. We have to actually repair the equipment before those customers are restored. So just wanted to give a little bit of an aspect of the different scenarios we see and why some outages are longer than others, even though they may be very similar in nature. So here's some of the outage causes that we see, both overhead and underground. Tree limbs, wind, lightning, obviously those are very large aspects of any of our storm work, but they also happen during normal day stuff where we've got a tree limb that's been loose for quite a while and finally falls on an overhead line. Arresters, critters in the underground equipment, dig-ins and failed equipment, overloading equipment, and then vehicle accidents like Tom had mentioned before. Okay, now we'll go on to an extreme weather event and kind of go over that same flow of how we go from reporting an incident all the way to restoration. But I'll give you a little bit of insight into how that's different than a normal blue sky day. So here we've got some stats from the August 9th of 2025 storm. So in our system, each incident, each location that has an issue for a customer shows up on the image you see there on the right as an entry. So during the peak of that storm, we had 1,000+ incidents in our queue. So those are all of the sites that we have to go out to either see what the damage is or to just assess and determine whether it's, maybe it's a communication cable that's on the ground and it's not something that we have to restore, but it is a site that we have to go to confirm that there's not LES equipment that's damaged or on the ground. So all of those incidents were either no power, wire down, blinking lights, or other. So if a customer just wanted to give us some insight and it didn't fall into one of those previous 3 categories. So after cleanup, there were 329 incidents of no power that we restored as part of that storm. 627 of those incidents required action from our crews. So that could be something like a street light down that did not have a customer outage associated with it, but it's something that we had to repair. As far as the assessing, so storms bring more. As you saw with 1,000+ incidents, and really those come in almost real time. If it's a quick storm that pops up out of nowhere, all 1,000+ of those incidents happen and populate in our system pretty quick. So we really need to bring order to the chaos in order to be able to work through an event like that and respond effectively. So there's more incidents, there's more damage, we have way more hazardous conditions for the crews. We have more personnel in the office. So nights and weekends, you've got all these crews and operators working towards the restoration. They need support, meals, whatever it is, the logistics to get them material. So everything's just on an order of magnitude larger than our normal day outages. So the way to fight against that challenge is we utilize the incident command structure. It's essentially just an organizational structure. We have folks within LES that have normal everyday jobs. When we have an event like this, we have folks helping do things that they wouldn't do in their normal day-to-day jobs. So this structure, using the ICS, is just a way for us to help support the crews that are out there doing the work and to manage communications to customers and to be more efficient in the way that we go about restoration. So when we have a large event, I'll just go through quickly our restoration priority. So at a high level, our goal is to restore as many customers as we possibly can as quickly as we can. So knowing that in a large event, we have a lot of hospitals, our own LES facilities, a lot of those different locations are without power. So we do focus on public safety and infrastructure first. And then we work our way down to transmission lines. So transmission lines, they feed, they're the high voltage lines that go from town to town and from state to state in the United States. So we have transmission lines in our territory, and when one of those goes down, they potentially feed thousands of customers. So if we have issues with those, it's very important that we prioritize getting those restored because it'll help us restore more customers sooner. The next on the list is substations and distribution feeders. So those are our next largest pieces of equipment that feed our customers. They're the main trunk lines that go throughout the city and serve thousands of customers as well. So that's our next priority as we go down through an event. Next is the lateral line. So as you go through the neighborhoods and you look at the overhead lines that you see throughout town, you'll notice that we have a main line going down an arterial street, and then we have taps that go off into the neighborhoods. Those are our lateral lines, and they feed smaller neighborhoods, and they're in the hundreds to maybe approaching 1,000, but typically in the hundreds of customers or less. And then following that is the distribution transformers like we saw in the example earlier, where they can feed up to 25 customers. And then finally, it's the individual customers. So we might have a single customer off in a neighborhood with no other outages, but they had a tree limb fall on their overhead drop to their service, to their meter. So those are the last ones that we get to just by the priority of getting as many customers restored as quickly as we can. So some additional roles that pop up during these storms. One of them would be, so we have a limited number of crews. So in the last storm, we had, I think, 16 crews from LES that were working through different incidents. And when you think about the 1,000+ different incidents in our queue, it's just not enough to fully assess what's going on the site or in the town. So what we have is damage assessors, wire watchers, and service repair crews. So it's folks that are not part of our normal crews that are out there taking notes on every one of those incidents that the crews haven't gotten to yet. So how much damage is here at this next site where the crew's going to be in a couple hours? Do they need a tree trimming crew to come out and clear the way so that the crew can put the line back up in the air? Wire watchers. So if we've got a wire down on the ground and it hasn't been de-energized yet, we've got folks that can go out into the field, stand by and make sure nobody approaches the line until we can get a crew over there to de-energize it safely. And then the service repair crews. So if there are some of those single customers that are out and there's something quick that we can do on our side to get them repaired, they may be able to do that in certain scenarios. So here's our map showing our damage assessment tool. So it essentially allows that group of damage assessors to pull up the app, to see all of the sites that the crews haven't been to, and to start visiting those sites, and they can take notes and get that information back to the key decision makers here in the office. We've got a short video here to show you an example of what a wire down on the ground can look like. One key thing to remember here is that an energized line on the ground may not be as obvious as what you're seeing here. So as we always state to the public, if you see a wire down, steer clear of it, keep your distance, because you never know if it's energized or not until we've been able to come out and assess the situation. All right. And so now we're to the point where we get to the switching. So trying to get some of the customers back on in a big event. So we start with our troubleshooting crews. They're gonna go out to the site, and if it's an incident that requires little to no repair, they can get it back on. So we may have some circuits where we've got 1,000 or 2,000 customers on, and it could truly just be a limb on the line towards the source side of the problem. And all they have to do is clear that limb off the line and throw a fuse back in or close a breaker back in to get all the customers repaired. So they're the first ones on site, and typically they work through quite a few incidents on their own or a two-man truck pretty quickly. And in some scenarios, they can switch around some of the damaged equipment to get a subset of the customers restored. And again, they're focusing on the top priority incidents, so they're working with the system operators to identify the larger outages first and work their way down. And they're typically there to, they can also be there to make stuff safe. Excuse me, safe. So if we do have a wire on the ground, they're typically the first ones we send out to de-energize and make that site safe. For the incidents that have a lot more damage, that's where the construction crews come in. So they may need tree crews to help out before they get there. They're repairing broken poles, failed transform or damaged transformers. If we've got cross arms that are supporting the wires that are broken, they're the ones that are coming out to fix those. So with a broken cross arm, that might take an hour, but with something like multiple broken poles, we're looking at multiple hours or maybe a day or so, depending on, you know, if it's a mile long of broken poles or if it's just a couple. So they're the ones that are working on the sites that do take longer to get restored. And then when we get into these larger events, like I said, we only have so many crews. You know, our crews are built up to get the work done on our system to either to fix stuff that's going on that's broken, to install new services to developments that are popping up around town. But really, we don't have enough crews to deal with large storms, depending on how much damage is done. So what we have is mutual aid. It's basically an agreement with other utilities that when we run into trouble, that there's always help out there. So whether OPPD experiences a storm or not, you know, we may reach out to them to see if they've got additional crews that can come help us out. Or if they also experience that storm, then we reach out further to other areas of Nebraska or even nationwide. So the more crews we can get in, that means more repairs quicker. And then those crews are facilitated by LES bird dogs, essentially just facilitators to be the eyes and the ears and to work with our operators to dispatch them to the next site, but basically to make sure that we always have an LES representative giving them guidance on where in our system to go and to answer any questions or issues that they may have as they're working through the restoration. And the restoration doesn't just stop with getting the customers back on. So in that small example, we talked about repairing or replacing that cable that had failed. The same thing goes for a large storm. The only difference is this could take weeks to months to finish all the follow-up work. So we've got, like I said, street lights that are damaged or down. Some of that stuff may be sitting unattended until we make sure all the customers are back. But once the customers are restored, then we've got to go back to those sites and repair all the stuff that's, I guess, quote unquote, been temporarily fixed. So sometimes we have a broken pole and we've determined that we can temporarily support that pole to get the customers restored. But ultimately, we have to go back to that location and replace that pole for the long term. So there's a lot of work that happens after the fact and keeps the crews busy after a large storm like that. And then lastly, after we deal with an event like that, we all get around the table, and this is not just the crews and the operators, but everybody at LES that helps facilitate and support those storm restoration efforts, get around a table and we talk about what went well, what didn't go well, and how we can improve. So obviously, these last couple of years, we've had quite a bit of experience, fortunate or not, but we have had that experience and we've learned a lot from it. So we take those action items back to the table, we make improvements to our processes, and hopefully we respond quicker and more efficiently next time. At this point, I'll turn it back over to Tom.
All right. Well, Joe just talked about how LES works to restore power to you. I'm going to talk now about some things you should consider, or you might want to consider for your facilities. Considerations when an outage occurs and affects your operations, some ways to potentially lessen the impact by having a plan in place for such an occurrence. We use a term, our side of the meter versus your side of the meter internally a lot, but some people don't necessarily know what that means. So let me explain. It's a point of demarcation between LES's responsibility and your responsibility. LES is responsible for everything up to the metering point of your facility. You just heard from Joe the LES approach to restoration on our side of the meter. You, however, are responsible for everything from the meter on into and through your building. Essentially everything downstream from the meter as electricity would flow. So you're responsible for things such as any damage that might have occurred from that large event. You know, the tree Joe talked about that could be taking a line that's downstream from the meter down, that would be your responsibility to repair. A meter socket pulled away from the structure or the building, things like that. You'd also need to be responsible for things like provisions for backup power, if that would be warranted, and possibly having a business plan in place if the risks justify such a thing. So we've been talking about LES. Now we're going to talk more specifically about you and your business. So here's some things to consider. How much risk do you have in terms of lost production, lost business, lost product, or lost raw materials if you don't have power to support or maintain these? If this is significant, you might want to have a plan in place to alleviate potential losses. Is the cost to implement such a plan justified when compared to the cost of just absorbing any potential losses that might occur from the occasional outage? But does that number change from a short duration outage to a long one? And how does your business stand in regard to these very long, these very different lengths of disruptions? And what would it take to mediate those? Does your risk really justify backup generation, for instance? What other things do you need to consider to soften the impact of an outage, short or long? And what other things beyond not having power should you be considering? And then how do you get back to normal post-event when the power comes back on? A thorough evaluation of the costs are, what the costs are to your business when the lights go out, or another unexpected event, may not be a power outage, it could be something else, helps determine the level of planning needed. Business continuity plans can be written for various situations, power outages, other types of events. So since we're your power company, we're going to focus more on the power outages type of events as we continue talking today. So power outages typically come in a couple flavors. There's a short duration outage. These are typically a few minutes up to an hour or so, but they usually just result in an interruption to your work. Some reset of operations might be required, but usually nothing that has a major impact. Long duration outages, there's a few more things to consider. Now you got to start thinking about things about like, what about my employees? Do I just leave them here hoping the lights be on a little bit, or do I just send them home? How do I maintain product if temperature sensitive or there's other holding requirements for it? How do you protect your facilities, like physical security or keeping your pipes from freezing or flooding due to a loss of sump pumps or lift stations? If you have a shipping and receiving, is it able to function? Would backed up trucks to your dock cause an issue? Is there adequate lighting to get those loaded or unloaded? Will the dock doors even open, or your dock levelers operate without power? Your employees also might be dealing with the same event at their homes. Will you have enough staff? Will they be able to come in? Do you need a plan or a contingency plan for that? So with a lot more logistics to consider for a long-term outage, there's a lot more to consider. So start thinking about those situations that Joe described, those short-term outages, those longer duration outages, and think about our community. Think about the critical needs for our community. Things like fire and police station, hospitals, municipal water pumping, communication systems, disaster sheltering locations, government operation centers. We trust that there's a plan in place that takes care of those critical needs despite the circumstances. So, what are the critical needs for your organization? Probably one of the first things, the safety of your employees. You don't want to lose inventory or product loss. Preserving raw materials, protecting your facilities, protecting your data, your security. Is there a plan to address these when the unexpected happens? And again, do you need one? Maybe it's not that big of a deal. Maybe it's a major deal. So one of the first things that comes to mind for a means to provide electric power when the utility power goes out is generators. We get calls a lot after these large events and a lot of questions about generators. So we're going to spend a few minutes talking about them. So again, how much risk, we're back to this risk word, is needed to justify backup power? Generators are expensive and there's a cost to maintain them after you own them. So are they really needed? What is the level of loss at stake? Does the cost of that generator dwarf the potential monetary loss, or could it be the other way around? Or does it depend? And it usually depends. It can be a complicated calculation. So some things to consider when evaluating that is how much time without power before you need to scrap your work in process, your raw materials, your finished goods. Do you have temperature sensitive materials you need to be concerned with? Are you a wholesale retail operation that maintains temperature of refrigerated foods, medications, other products? Could you shut down your production process safely in an orderly way without power? If you're a care facility, can you care for those relying on you? Could you feed patients, residents in a care facility? Can you maintain their food at a safe temperature? Can you provide for safe egress due to the lack of lighting, possibly? Can you maintain physical security? How about safe atmosphere due to lack of HVAC? Does your water come from the city or does it come from a well? If it's on a well, you may not have water either, so a whole nother concern comes into play there. Without HVAC, how do you keep your pipes from freezing? Broken pipes create considerable damage. Broken fire sprinklers lead to loss of fire protection. Frozen HVAC lines can render heating units useless. A lot of things to consider when you're looking at the possibility of, do I need a generator? So when we start talking about generators, there's really three common choices to make: a permanently installed generator, a portable generator, or a portable rental generator, or your own portable generator, not rented, but you own it, you keep it, you maintain it. So permanently installed generators, they're fixed in place. They have a permanent home. They never move. They're fully automatic. It doesn't need intervention to provide backup power to the critical loads. It just kicks on automatically. It senses when the power goes out, starts the engine, transfers the load to the generator. When it's up to speed, it's sized for the load being served. These are typically engineered systems where the load calculations are utilized to right size the generator. It's a fixed solution for the right size the job needs every time. There's the pros of this is it's always there. It's always ready to go when needed. Nobody's going to borrow it because it's hardwired in place and is bolted in place. It doesn't walk away. It provides power to the critical loads within seconds of the utility power going out. So power is restored to your critical loads typically in less than a minute. You own it, you maintain it, you know its service history, you assure its readiness and reliability, not someone else. Houston has some capabilities for some remote monitoring, so it can text you and tell you when it has started, so you know you have an outage at your facility. It'll even tell you like if there's an overtemp alarm or low oil, things like that. It can, in in a lot of cases, on the smaller size units, it could be connected to natural gas. And then it's pretty much self-sufficient. It doesn't really require any babysitting or monitoring as long as it's running. The very large units do require other fuel sources, so there would be some fueling considerations for those. Some of the cons, however, on a permanently installed generator, it's an initial capital cost. It's an owned asset. It's going to need a permanent home, and it'll need some footprint dedicated for it at home. It requires ongoing maintenance, upkeep, testing costs. These are essential to assure the readiness of it when it's needed. They could be set to automatically test themselves, but sometimes it's better to have human eyes on that. Another con is it can't be moved to another location. It's going to serve the load, the critical load it serves, and that's it. It's a permanent installation. The fuel ventilation exhaust requirements may require some site-specific engineering to make sure the installation fits the need. So another option to that permanently installed generator would be a portable rental generator. These you would have delivered just as needed. They can have multiple locations. You could have multiple locations set up to connect a portable generator and dispatch it only where it's needed. It would be connected, fueled, started manually before the critical load is served. It's going to require some periodic refueling, and it's going to require some pretty specific cabling to be staged ready to go as well. This is more than just a typical extension cord that would connect these. It's going to require a place to connect and a means to do that safely, a transfer switch, a breaker, docking stations, and it needs a place to be parked when it's being utilized. The pros, there's no upfront capital for something you hope you never use. There's no dedicated footprint. You call it, rent it when you need it. It's maintained by others, so you don't have ongoing maintenance expenses or testing costs. But there's also some cons, possible cons, and that is how long is it going to take to get one in place, connected, and in operation when you need it? And is that going to be fast enough? The best case, this is going to take a few hours, maybe closer to a full day in a worst case scenario. Are you going to be able to refuel it? It's going to take more than a 5-gallon gas can to refuel these things. They're pretty large units. Portable bulk tank or a bulk delivery is going to be required fairly frequently. Most portables will be gas or diesel, and again, requiring large quantities of fuel. For example, a 500 kW generator can burn in excess of 50 gallons of fuel an hour. So that refueling plan is a major consideration for these generators if they're running pretty heavily loaded. So another option to that is owning a portable generator. Again, you have a lot of the other cons, but it might be a better solution in some cases. The pros of this is eliminates the risk of what's available at the rental yard. And it's on site, it's close by, so potentially less time to get it into place and your critical line can be online faster. You could also have one portable generator that serves multiple satellite locations. You set them up for the portable generator connection and dispatch a generator where it's needed. So some advantages of that. Some of the cons, however, all of the other portable generators, cons still exist, as I mentioned earlier. Since this generator is portable, there might be some risk of it being borrowed when needed. Depending on the size, some of these units are a chore to tow, so you have to make sure you have a vehicle with enough towing power to get that thing into place. Maintenance and testing is now back in your court. It's your responsibility again, just like that permanently installed generator. You're back to having the capital expense and the cost of ownership as well. And again, I've got to remember those cables, because these are very specific cables. You're going to have adequately sized and lengths of cable necessary to connect that generator to its worst case location. One other option is a small portable generator. We see these things in campgrounds, by food trucks, on job site, construction sites. So that might be an option if you have a very small load. Say you have a refrigerator or a freezer where you just want to maintain temperature. Running an extension cord from one of these to one of these generators to the appliance is a viable solution. These things are very portable. They're easily moved and transported without specialized equipment. They're easier to refuel. You can refuel them from a gas can. They don't require special cabling. Just typical extension cords are readily available configuration cords and plugs on them. A few cautions, however: don't use these indoors or without adequate ventilation. Make sure the generator is adequately sized for the load being connected, or you're going to be disappointed. You got to consider a few things when sizing those, and talking to your generator vendor can help you with that. And then again, make sure your extension cords are also adequately sized for the job being done with those. So what do I really need to back up with your generator? Only you can determine that. You're going to have to determine your critical load, what that loss is going to cost you. Quite often, not everything in a facility is backed up with generator. However, sometimes it is easier just to put everything on the generator and size your transfer switch and such accordingly. Again, your generator vendor, electrical engineer, electrical contractor, they can all help you with providing cost options to do some or all of that. So we have spent most of our time today talking about generators, as they're the most common method of providing backup power during outages. There's a few other things that pop up once in a while that might be worth considering. Uninterruptible power supplies, as the name implies, provides uninterrupted power to critical equipment that doesn't tolerate power interruptions without some dire consequences. Those might be something to look at and consider and to have a conversation about. We hear a lot about battery storage these days, and people say, well, if I have a battery, could I use that? A battery and a UPS are similar, so the answer is yes, maybe, but it's going to require some engineering, some sizing, some configuration to make that work. We also hear about renewable generation. Hey, I have solar on my roof, so I'll be good as long as the sun's shining. Well, that might be the case if your system's configured with a battery to allow that. But most solar systems will not produce power once utility power is off. So make sure you know the answers to that question and how your solar system will operate before making that assumption. A little more investigation might be necessary on that one. Any of those systems, whether it be a generator, a battery, a UPS, is going to require maintenance. So these are not install and forget systems. It seems like every major outage we have, we get a phone call or two, and they're typically a frantic caller stating their backup generator won't start or just failed. Most of these installations are considered critical loads, and the customer seeking our assistance to quickly respond to their facility and get the power back on. We're sympathetic, but it really comes down to the customer to maintain that and make sure that thing is ready to go. An outage isn't the time to discover that your backup equipment isn't going to serve you. So maintain and test is the best way to be prepared for that situation. Run just a few things that maintenance plan should include: run a periodic test, do it weekly. Some people do it monthly. The criticality of your load is going to help you decide that frequency. And in some cases, regulatory agencies will dictate that. Usually you do that under load for an hour or so. So make sure you're running that thing and testing it. Beyond the generating your own power is a couple of other things. Just want to plant a seed for you to be thinking about. Have a backup plan to your backup plan. Plan B, C, maybe even D, depending on your criticality. Murphy's Law is going to be there. They're just waiting. Murphy's waiting to strike. So be ready for them and, cut them off at the pass. Think of other systems that a lack of electricity is going to affect. We talked a little bit about heating and cooling for your pipe breakage, fire protection, raw materials, things like that. But how about your phone system? If you have a PBX or a voice over IP system, does it have backup power? You don't want to find out that you can't communicate out or in during a situation like that. If you have cell phones, do you have a repeater system? If that goes down, you may not have cell service deep within your building. Something else to consider. Site security systems, some bad actors will take advantage of a outage to breach your facility. Will your system detect an unauthorized entry during an outage? Will your cameras be functional and recording? How about card access? Does those card access for your exterior doors have battery backup or standby power? If not, where are the keys to get through them with the powers out? Or are there even keys on those doors? Just a handful of other things to be thinking about. What other resources might not be available during a storm? If the power's out to the whole city, how about your service providers, your vendors? What do you rely on to be there that may not? Water, natural gas, internet, temperature controlled temporary trucks, bringing in reefer trucks to store and maintain temperature on your critical stuff. Talk to your insurance company. What steps might they require you to do before they cover a loss? Does your coverage include protection for outage events? Things to have discussions on well before that outage. So to wrap it up, list the risks, list the what ifs. Imagine the worst case scenarios. Imagine that long outage. If any of you are around for the Y2K planning we did years ago, a lot of what ifing went on in those discussions. Talk to your suppliers, see what's going to be affected, secure your outside resources, then write it down, share it, train on it, and check it and update it frequently. Joe talked about, the progression of how we restore power. We hope you're on the bottom of this pyramid and you get your power back on quickly. But if you're on the top, it could be a while, it could be days, and you really should consider any of those where you might fall on that pyramid. So with that, when you do have an outage, we want you to report that to us. The best way to do that is using LAS Powerline, which is an 800 number, or to go to las.com if you have internet access and report it that way. If you're a large business and you're a key account, you've been provided with a phone number to talk to somebody so you can make business decisions during that outage. Always report that outage. Always let us out. We don't know you're out. We do not have a means of detecting outages within many parts of our system. We rely on you to notify us. So if you're not on the list, you're not on the list until you let us know. So let us know. Call us whether the lights are totally out or just some are out or they're dimmer than normal. All those things we need to know about. Report again if those around you are restored and you're still out. There may be something else broken that we're not aware of. We're not going to give you an estimate of time restoration. Hearing what you learned from Joe today, you can see the complexities of our restoration efforts and why it's logistically impossible to predict how much time each step of the restoration is going to take. So only after the crews are in the field, getting the grasp of the scope of damage, do we start to get a glimmer of the restoration effort needed. But even then, it's impossible to predict timing with so many moving parts, unexpected findings, and unknowns yet to be found. So to wrap it up, err on the side of caution. You might be one of the few that land on the tip of the iceberg or tip of that pyramid, so prepare for that. We hope you're closer to the base. Prepare for the best, or hope for the best, prepare for the worst. Murphy is going to show up, so try to beat him at his own game. So with that, if you have some questions, Amy, do we have any questions out there? Joe and I can try to answer those for you.
Not yet, but maybe we'll give a few moments in case anyone does.
Well, while we're waiting for questions to come rolling in, we would like your feedback on this event, and there's a QR code. We would like you to just take a shot of that right now and send us your thoughts. And there'll be a little survey we'd ask you to fill out, and you can put some comments in there. If you heard something today you'd like to talk about more and you want to continue this conversation, give me a call. There's my contact information, phone number, and email. Be glad to sit down and talk to you and loop in anybody else here at LES that would be helpful with that conversation. Always more than willing to talk about such things and help think through and do planning on this. There will also be a survey sent out after, but we would really like you to do it now before you forget. And in that, let us know what other topics that you might want to hear from us on. This one kind of came from your feedback. We've been hearing this quite a while, so this is why we put this one together, and we can certainly do more. So let us know what you want to hear, and we'll try to prepare some content for you. Seeing anything, Amy?
No, not yet.
Everybody's hungry. It's lunchtime. Or their mouths are full and they can't type. Does that work that way?
We did have an employee in the chat mention that there is a key account outage number. Tom, I don't know if you want to speak to that at all.
If you are one of our largest users, we do have a number. The numbers I shared earlier were what the majority of people, we would like you to call in to use that 800 number. It is an automated system, and you won't be talking to a real person. And that's only to facilitate, as Joe said, when those outages happen, they can happen all of a sudden, all at once. So we can suddenly have thousands of customers out within minutes, thus thousands of phone calls coming in. No call center could handle that without you being on hold for a long, long time. Thus, we use an automated system to register those calls and get them into our system. Our large customers have some business decisions to make. Some of those things I mentioned earlier, like what do I do with my employees? How do I plan for this? We're going to talk with them and try to get feedback from them and then give them feedback of what we know. And usually we're not going to tell them how much time, because again, we don't know, but we will say plan for the worst. This one's looking bad. It could be 3 or 4 days. This one's looking bad. It could be the rest of the day. It just depends. And we will try to feed some of that information so they can decide, do we bring in second shift? Do we send people home? Do we cancel operations? Do we start moving product into refrigerated trucks? Things like that, for instance. If you're not sure if you're a key account or not, give us a call. We'll let you know where you stand on that. Our large businesses is typically, the very big users in our service territory have that option, have that phone number. Well, it is 12:30, so we want to be respectful of your time. If you have questions, you can throw them into your survey too, and we will respond to you. Just give us some information how we can get a hold of you. And again, if you want to continue the conversation, give us a call. We'd be glad to share more or share what we know. And hopefully this has been helpful to you. And thanks for joining us for our LES Smart Energy Forum. Hope to see you again at our next one. Have a great day.